All right, so we are going to get started with this organizer that you have here. I wrote in the to-do list that it was 3.2. It's something that kind of goes over both sections. So 3.1, 3.2, you're going to have to be able to identify these angle types. While you're looking at them, you might recognize that some of these look very familiar. They're definitely angles that you learned in middle school. This is just something you need a refresher on. And the sooner you are able to identify them correctly and quickly, the better you're going to be when you have to start writing equations about them. So the first thing we're going to start out with is, what are all these angles? So if you can understand what these 5 words here mean, it's going to help you understand and remember what all these different angle types are. So whenever you see the word interior, I want you to think inside. So if you see interior angles, I want you to think they're inside parallel lines. And we'll get to those parallel lines in just a few minutes. Whenever you see exterior, you need to think that they are outside the parallel lines. So interior, inside, exterior, outside. When you see the word alternate, I want you to think opposite. And in this case specifically, we're talking about opposite sides of the transversal. And we're going to talk about what that transversal means. When you see consecutive, I want you to think about same side. So consecutive kind of means either next to or in a row. So you can think that same side. You can think in a row. I like to think same side of the transversal. And again, we'll talk about what that means. And the last one, if you think about things that are corresponding, usually that means they match up, or they are paired up, or they have some kind of same position. So when you think corresponding, I want you to think matching positions. So none of this is really going to make much sense right now, but eventually it will. So when you see these 5 words, you need to think about these, and that's going to give you a hint as to what types of angles you're looking for. So the first time we're going to look for alternate interior. So alternate interior, we see interior, so it's angles that are inside the parallel lines. On opposite, alternate, we said think opposite, on opposite sides of the transversal. So when we look at this picture, when you hear me say parallel lines, hopefully you're aware that these are our parallel lines. And transversal, we defined yesterday on our notes. We said a transversal is any line that crosses 2 other lines. So this line A here is our transversal right now. So when I say inside parallel lines, outside parallel lines, I mean the yellow ones. When I say same side of the transversal or opposite sides of the transversal, I mean this pink one. And you'll get used to that terminology. So if we're looking for angles that are inside parallel lines on opposite sides of the transversal, we need to look at our picture. Inside the parallel lines, so that leaves me with 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I want a pair that are on opposite sides of the transversal. They need to be immediately inside and on opposite sides of the transversal. So one pair that I can list is 3 and 6. Again, immediately inside the yellow lines, opposite sides of the transversal. So under diagram, I'm going to write 3 and 6. The other pair that you can come up with then would be 4 and 5. Now the last thing we need to think about is, when you look at those angles, when those lines are parallel, which we for today are assuming that they are, when those lines are parallel, what do we know about those angle measurements? It doesn't help us to just know what they're called. It's going to help us to know about their measurements. So I'm going to tell you that alternate interior, even if you look at them, you might be able to figure it out. They are going to be congruent. So alternate interior angles are congruent. And you can tell that they look like they are congruent. The next ones are very similar, but one little word has changed. Alternate exterior. Angles that are exterior is outside the parallel lines on opposite sides of the transversal. So if we look for that in our picture, Now we want outside the parallel lines on opposite sides of the transversal. So outside would be 1, 2, 7, and 8. But I want opposite sides of the transversal. So I can say 1 and 8. Again, outside of the yellow lines, opposite sides of the transversal. The other pair that I could write are 7 and 2. And just like those alternate interior angles, you can see they look like they are the exact same and they are going to be congruent. So anything on alternate sides of the transversal, anything with the word alternate, is going to be congruent. All right, next one is consecutive interior. Now we're getting some different words here. So interior, again, is inside, so we're still thinking inside the parallel lines. But now it says consecutive. We said above, consecutive means same side of the transversal. So we want on the same side of the transversal. So consecutive interior are inside the parallel lines. So we're looking anywhere in here, but on the same side of the transversal. So anywhere in between these yellow lines, inside, but on the same side. So that would be like 4 and 6. They're inside the yellow lines on the same side of that transversal. So 4 and 6 would be one pair you can write. The other pair, hopefully you can see, would be 3 and 5. Now so far we've only seen angles that are congruent, and hopefully maybe you can tell when you look at these ones, they are not going to be the same. You can tell that 4 is an obtuse angle, 6 is an acute angle, so they are not the same. What we can say about them though is that they are supplementary. So that means, again, they add to 180. So you'll find all the angles we look at today are either supplementary or they're congruent. It has to be one or the other. All right, next one is consecutive exterior. So now we want angles that are outside of the parallel lines on the same side of the transversal. So if we look outside the parallel lines instead of inside now, so outside of the parallel lines on the same side of the transversal could be something like 2 and 8. Outside of the yellow lines, same side of the transversal. You can write that example. The other ones I could write would be 1 and 7. And I know it's tricky with all these colors in the diagram. I can't like erase it, but just do your best to figure it out. I think highlighting these parallel lines, highlighting the transversal helps a lot. These angles are also going to be supplementary. They also add to 180. All right, very last one is corresponding angles. Corresponding are the ones that are kind of unlike the others, because you can notice these all have the same kind of themes. Corresponding is different. So corresponding angles are angles that are in matching positions with respect to the parallel lines and transversals. So what that means is they have to be in the same position when you look at the parallel lines and you look at the transversal. So for an example, let's say I look at angle 7. When I look at angle 7, it is below the yellow line to the left of the pink line. Below the yellow to the left of the pink. What other angle is below the yellow to the left of the pink? That would be 3. 3 and 7 are corresponding. Another way to think about it is if I picked up angle 7 and I slid it up, it would sit right on top of angle 3 perfectly. So an example I could put there is 3 and 7. Another example I could write is 1 and 5. If 3 and 7 are corresponding, 1 and 5 are both on top of those, so those also have to be corresponding. If I continue around there, 4 and 8 are corresponding, they're in matching positions. And 2 and 6. Corresponding angles, since they are in matching positions and they sit right on top of each other, if I would move them around, they are congruent. You should be able to see that those are going to be the same. So what we're going to do on the back here is we're just going to look at one of these examples to practice writing a few more different types. And then you're going to get to work on your packet where you're going to be finding missing measurements, identifying the angles, and eventually working with some variables. So the first thing I'm going to do is highlight my lines. I have my 2 parallel lines, and I have my transversal. So if I identify these lines, line A is my transversal. So that's my one line that crosses 2 other lines. Lines M and N are my parallel lines. So those are the ones I'm looking for inside, outside. So what you can do is you can pause the video, and I'd like you to see if you can go ahead down through these different questions and list as many pairs as you can. For corresponding, you're going to have 4 pairs. The rest of them, B through E, you're going to have 2. And vertical angles, you can have 4. So go ahead and pause the video and try those. As you do that, I'm going to write the answers in, and then you can come back and check your answers. All right, looking at the answers here, the picture is sideways, so it makes it a little bit more difficult. If you need to turn your paper, you can, if it's easier to look at it that way. When I look for corresponding angles, I'm looking for matching positions. So I see ones like 1 and 5. If I picked up angle 1 and I slid it, it would sit right on top of angle 5. Another would be 2 and 6, 4 and 8, 3 and 7. Alternate interior, I want inside my green lines on opposite sides of the transversal. So inside the green on opposite sides of the transversal would be 3 and 5, 2 and 8. Alternate exterior are very similar, so I want outside of my parallel lines, outside of the green lines, on opposite sides of the transversal. So 4 and 6, and 1 and 7. So that's what we have so far. Consecutive interior is inside my green lines on the same side of the transversal. So 3 and 8. Again, inside the green on the same side of that transversal. That helps you to look at it this way. Inside the green lines on the same side of the transversal. So 3 and 8. And the other pair is 2 and 5. And then consecutive exterior is outside those parallel lines. So any of these out here, but on the same side of the transversal. So that would be like 4 and 7 or 1 and 6. The last one hopefully was very easy for you. Vertical angles, those are ones we've known since chapter 1. So vertical angles are going to be ones like 1 and 3, 2 and 4, 5 and 7, 6 and 8. Okay, so there's those answers there. As you go to the packet, use this organizer, refer to it, especially because you won't have the measurement information memorized. You're going to have to learn it as you go. So when you're writing your writing your equations, you're solving for variables, you're finding missing measurements, make sure you're using this. The first step to getting those questions right is being able to identify the angles correctly. If you can't identify the angles, you're not going to get those correct. So make sure you're using this, asking your friends for help, asking other people in the class for help, looking for other resources online or in a textbook if you need help with that.